Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Eric Forsetter. He's the Vice President of Public Sector at PagerDuty. Eric, good to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thank you, Tom.
And agencies are always thinking about applications staying up and running, monitoring performance and so forth, but they don't always stay up and running. That's just a reality of life. But maybe let's review some of the contemporary, up-to-date ways in which you can keep track of that to make sure operations keep going.
Absolutely. When you think about IT today in the modern world, you're thinking about a digital transformation. Typically, applications have been siloed. You have different groups running different teams within an organization, especially in the federal government and the public sector. And while that worked for a long time, we've gotten to the point where we're going through a digital transformation where agencies are moving to the cloud, might be multiple clouds, different environments are hybrid right now. And really what agencies need to do is figure out, how do I give minutes back to the mission? How do I ensure the resiliency of the approach that I'm taking? And how do I transform my environment so that I am more modern, more agile, and I'm improving the digital customer experience for the citizen in the long term? And in doing so, you're thinking about things like, how are we going to accelerate the pace of innovation while at the same time ensure resiliency for all the apps that I'm doing and give a smooth transition to this transformation as we go through it. When you think about this, a lot of the organizations that are out there today, they're thinking about reducing risk as well as ensuring that the cost of these major operations don't result in a failure. We have some studies that we did recently. Cisco did a study where they basically found that 57% of the time developers are spending their work on actually fixing applications as opposed to building and creating that transformation. And when we do this, we think about, how do we reduce operational costs with things like intelligent automation, the big buzzword out there being Gen AI, but we want higher productivity. We want to give minutes back to the mission.
Right. So if you design an application then that speeds up things, creates efficiencies, or makes it easier for citizens, that is all undone by applications that crash, basically.
Correct. And so what happens is we find that as these modern applications are coming into play, to your point, if I have, let's say, a tax app where I can go online and look for, what's my tax code, but it crashes, well, now these citizens can't get to what they need in terms of the business from the IRS or wherever that tax app is residing. At the same token, you have your developers who should be working on the next version of it, fixing a patch. And what happens is there's so much noise. And what do I mean by noise? Well, you have many different tools that you might be using to monitor, to do observability, to look at security, because security is huge today. There's so many threats. You have just the unknown thing where sometimes items crash because someone patched an application, maybe it's an operating system, maybe it's something in the cloud, and it caused your application to break. And so when you have all these noise and all these different things that are coming in, it's hard for humans to actually watch everything that's happening. They want to see everything, but if you're staring at a screen after a while, it's like reading a 10,000 page book. Your mind can't handle it. So we need to automate. We need actually applications to help us to tune down the noise, to actually think through it and say, you know what, this alert matters, while this other alert, hey, it's just innocuous. It's just someone logging in, something that is typical or benign in our environment. But when you have millions of these alerts coming in, it's impossible for any human to do that.
Right. So the idea then is to ensure that you prevent an application from failing by being able to analyze what's going on, not waiting for that error code or that freeze or that 404 code, whatever the case might be. You want to be ahead of that.
Right. You want to be proactive. And I think what you're getting at is like, how do we know what to look for? How do we instill in our environment something that will proactively look for different events or different alerts that are going to occur? And when it does these things, then learn from them and use machine learning, use some Gen AI, maybe do something like our product does, which actually will tell you when when an alert happens, like, we've seen this before. Would you like me to reboot a server or stop a processes? Or would you like me, even better, to write that report on what happened so that you have the post-analysis of, or post-mortem written up for you, because if we can learn from the mistakes, then it makes it easier for us to deal with them. And if you think about the world we're in today, there's so many different applications that are out there. There's new threats every day, and sometimes there's just human error. We know the July shutdown that occurred across the globe. That was just human error on patching. And again, sometimes those things are preventable, sometimes they're not. But if we can be proactive in that measure and to understand when things are happening, and not only when things are happening, but who should we call on? So for example, Tom, if you lead a team of 30 developers, you may or may not know which developer is responsible for the application, or for the part of the application that broke, or maybe even for the security around it. In the federal government, we think about all these contractors. If you're a large agency, you might have 4 or 5 different contractors working on your environment. One might be doing security, another might be doing operations, a third might be doing development, and they have intersecting points, and you don't know who's responsible when something breaks. And being able to get to mean time to resolution quicker, faster, makes a difference, as well as bringing that knowledge with you, because if we see this break once, what happens when it happens the next time?
Right, just to back up though a moment, the more that you have this machine learning kind of overlay on these activities and alerts, the more efficacious you become at predictive analysis further and further upstream.
Correct.
So that trends known to the algorithm might even tell it to invoke an action before even the alert would come.
That's right. And if you think about it that way, if we see predictive trends, if we see that, then this server gets high CPU over time, eventually it's going to overload and shut down, maybe there's something we can do to stop a service. Maybe there's something we can do to let someone know. It doesn't necessarily have to be the machine taking action, but it could be something where we're proactive and we send you a notification, hey, we're seeing this alert happening multiple times. We've seen it before. We know that, we believe this will happen. Would you like us to take action? Will you do something yourself? And with so much information, so much noise happening, it's important to be proactive, because you're looking to protect the digital customer experience. And at the same time, you're just trying to reduce the risk of major operational failure. We did a study in 2024 with about 1,500 different IT leaders across the world. And what they told us was roughly $800,000 is spent on any customer impacting event. And that's only for one day. So imagine if you have a multiple day or even a week, God forbid, outage, what that does to your organization. And so it's so important when you're thinking about how am I going to transform my environment, the first thing you should think about is how is incident response, incident management going to be a part of it? Because you're talking about very complex environments that maybe one person knows everything in the organization about, but what we care about is not just what that one person knows, how do we get that knowledge across the whole organization? Because God forbid that person leaves the organization or decides to do something else or even is on vacation. How are we ensuring the resiliency and success of our operation going forward?
And can this information get fine-grained enough such that if something is going to happen and you feel it will happen, sometimes you have to stop right then and there, make a patch, make a fix, but you might also know to say, well, we know it's going to happen, but not quite yet. Let's wait till a low period of usage. Let's wait till 2 a.m. to fix it, so you can get a little more fine-grained and keep your customer experience from suffering.
Yeah, that's a great point. We work with several major federal agencies and major cities as well, and many of these have their websites or their customer-facing applications. They use our product not to monitor, but really to bring in and consolidate all that noise. And what happens is there are times when they know they're going to have these peaks and there's going to be an issue. And when that issue arises, they're alerting different teams. They're letting management know, but they're also letting the operational folks know. And they're giving them decision points. Like, based on this, we recommend this. We've seen this knowledge before. And in doing so, if it's 2 a.m., hey, it may just take an action by itself. It may say, you know what, let's reboot the system. There's not that many people looking at our website, at this time. We know based on past experience. But if it's 3 in the afternoon, hey, let's alert this team and let's figure out what we need to do. Maybe it's spin up more servers for that application itself and do something in the cloud. Or maybe it's, hey, we need to have a team come in right away to fix it. The other thing that's interesting too is that when you think about all of the applications that are out there, there's also a customer service portion of it or CS portion of it. And what happens many times is that the person who finds out first about an application being down or a resiliency problem is the customer service team. Now, why the customer service team? Well, Tom, you're on the website, you're having troubles, it doesn't work. What's the first thing you do? You pick up the phone or you hit the chat button and you say, you know what, I'm having this problem, Eric, and I'm the customer service rep. And as a customer service rep, I want to know, okay, well, I see you have this problem, how do I fix it? And so being able to alert not only the development team or the operations team, but also the customer service team as to here's what's going on. And by the way, not only what's going on, but we have a application team working on it, a security team. This is when we expect resolution. We've seen this before. It takes about 3 hours to fix. And then being able to proactively then say to that customer service rep, okay, when this is resolved, I can go notify the customer. So if you had called in, you can say, hey, it's about 3 hours, Tom, I'm going to call you back as soon as that issue is resolved. You get an alert or something tells you like, hey, now it's time for me to call back to Tom and say, hey, Tom, we fixed your issue. Let's get forward. And that, in the end, gives a great digital customer experience, not only for the person who, or the citizen, but also for the customer service rep, because he or she has the ability to really make good judgment and give them information, as opposed to, yeah, we're aware of it, we're working on it. It's more like, hey, this is proactive, we know what's happening, and we have a resolution in play.
All right, on that note, we're going to take a short break. My guest today is Eric Forseter. He's the Vice President of Public Sector at PagerDuty. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin on Federal Insights, sponsored by PagerDuty here on Federal News Network. Welcome back to Federal Insights, sponsored by PagerDuty here on Federal News Network. My guest today is Eric Forseter. He's the Vice President of Public Sector at PagerDuty. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. And before the break, we were talking about the idea of alerts happening and dealing with them. And you said something about the idea of the alerts making sure that the program owners know who to call. And the first couple of syllables of your company name is Pager,
right?
PagerDuty,
yeah,
and that invokes the idea that paging someone. Tell us more about how you know who to
call. Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because people, when I say PagerDuty, they kind of look at me funny, like I've never heard of PagerDuty. Like, are you selling pagers? What are you doing? And the reality is, we're not selling pagers. We've been around for about 15 years or so.
And so you're post-pager.
We're post-pager, yeah. But back then, there was actually the founder of the company was actually on PagerDuty, and he was a developer. He actually worked for Amazon, and when things broke, every weekend someone would have to take home a pager, and they'd say, "Who's on PagerDuty?" It's really annoying, right? And someone would break, someone would pick up the phone and literally call them. And he got this idea where he was like, you know what? I don't want to just get a call. I want someone to actually let me know and to alert me when things are happening. And that's where we're built out of. And since then, we've grown. We're about 15,000 customers worldwide, which is an incredible number, and over 65% of the Fortune 100. But the reality is, today, you may get paged, but 15 years ago, the smartphone was just really coming to life, and you might get an email, and there really was a pager. Today, it's more about alerting or notifying someone. So when you think about large-scale teams, whether it's you have a team of 10 people or 1,000 people, like there are organizations that we work with that have 10,000 people. And it's really important to understand not only which group is responsible, but maybe you have a rotation where it's like, this weekend it's Tom's turn to be on PagerDuty or to be on call. And another weekend it's Eric's responsibility. But hey, we forgot Eric was on vacation. So if Eric's on vacation and something goes down, but he's not here, and I was going to get paged, for lack of a better term, what happens? And being able to not only have that escalation, but also to understand, like, okay, we're going to let a certain team know or let certain team members know. And if they don't respond within a certain amount of time, then, hey, who do we go to next? I know one organization we work with in the federal government, the complexity of the mission that they work on is beyond comprehension. They have documents upon documents as this guy has this piece, but this lady has this piece. And a lot of times what happens is they end up scrambling. Hey, something breaks, and they're looking through literally pieces of paper to say, who is the right person that we need to call because it's broken? And if you can make that less manual, and then understand also, like, who is that person's boss, or who is other team members on that person's team, that's a huge benefit right there. It also helps you to understand, like, hey, this person's in charge of, let's say, development, while another person's in charge of deployment or security. A lot of times, we had an agency this summer where literally something went down and there was finger pointing, no, it's your responsibility, no, it's your responsibility, and they didn't even know where to start, and it took them 4 or 5 days to even get close to resolution, not because they didn't know how to fix it, they didn't know who the right people were. Once they got the right people involved, it was easy, but if you can find a quick way to notate not only who has responsibility, but then when things happen, how to analyze it in the future or to have postmortems about it, that gives you that knowledge base that you need. Because let's face it, in the government, contractors come and go. Even the employees, the feds themselves or the state employees, they may transfer from one division to another or a different agency, and you need to keep that knowledge centralized in the long term.
All right, so that leads to 2 questions. One, you have this program. People are using a program to monitor performance and be tracking alerts and events that could lead to alerts or failures even. How does the information on who's who and who's on duty, et cetera, get in there?
That's a great question. Yeah, and that's part of the process, is just being able to take different groups within the organization, and they have to populate it themselves. Now, you can manually do it, or you can also import it from the way that you're doing your development work or your security work. So you could bring your whole security team in and then slowly slice and dice it. The nice piece, though, is that the program itself learns over time. So it learns that, hey, we had this event, I'd recommend X, Y, and Z. I understand that this happened before. So when we're writing post-incident reviews, like, this is the retrospective that we should do. This is the learning that we should do. And it will also do something really cool, which is, if an incident occurs, and let's say I'm a manager, it can catch me up on where we are. So it could say, hey, we saw an alert come from product A, which is observability. We saw another alert coming from security. We opened a ticket in our help desk system or our CRM system. All these things are going on, and then it can give me a summary. So I walk in as a manager and I go, okay, I see that we had 3 or 4 monitoring things. They're critical. They're Sev 1. I see the security piece. It gave me an up-to-date on where we are currently, and then it's going to recommend, maybe you want to try these things. I can ask my team, have you tried these steps? And then afterwards, once it's done, we have a good post-mortem as to what happened and why, and we can document it. And a lot of that comes from Gen AI work that we use within our product as well, so that, again, we're using the Gen AI not to solve the problem, but to give us the information that we need to go forward and give us a summary of what's happening as well.
Right, and so then the second question is, that seems like it could help you understand your own organization better.
Absolutely.
And make sure that you have a plan of operation, a concept of operations for when an alert comes. Should it be the programmer? Should it be the systems operators, et cetera?
Yeah, and giving yourself that good plan is really important, because over time it can learn and say, hey, when we had this type of event, these are the type of people that solved the problem. And again, think about the government today. We transition from contractor to contractor, or we bring in new contractors to build new applications for us. So if I'm a large agency, let's say like the Treasury, and I put out a new bid to build something for our financial payment system, we might already have contractor A in there who's doing operations, but contractor B now comes in to build. Okay, that contractor B, we can add their people into this, and they'll have a better understanding of how operations work, but also we can then document where and when we should do certain things if contractor A leaves at some point or we transition to someone else. And it's a very delicate balance that happens in the government, because again, there's so much information. You think of massive agencies like the State Department or Commerce or Labor or Interior, even the DoD. These are massive operations with anywhere from 5 to 20,000 or more employees in the IT staff alone, and it's important for them to know. The other thing too, I think you touched on this, it's also important for the business users to know, because not every application is necessarily customer facing, but it's internal customer facing. And so you could let a business person know that, hey, we're having trouble with this payment system for this agency, and just so you know, payments to our procurement side team may take a little while. And this way the business knows what's happening, as well as the customer on the externally knows as well.
Plus, it lets you prioritize problems. I mean, if the payment system, you have a statutory obligation to do something, you want to know if that system's going to go down versus maybe a lesser critical system.
Correct. And again, it's important to prioritize these alerts, because to your point, you only have so much staff. And so if you don't know which things are not working, it becomes a problem. It also lessens the burden, again, on your customer support or your tech support line. Because, again, if everyone's calling in saying, hey, I can't get to my application, I can't do my job, or, hey, I'm trying to pay my taxes, I'm trying to get my Social Security benefit, I'm trying to get my VA benefit, if your customer service isn't good, all of a sudden you have a terrible citizen experience. And then guess what? All of a sudden the news wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to talk about this terrible experience we had and how the agency doesn't know what they're doing. And that's the last thing the agency wants. They really are looking to protect the citizen, and they want to give time back to the mission. The thing that we think about as well, and I was just at an event the other day with someone from DHS, and he was talking about, hey, how do I give time back to my mission? Because I'm not going to get more people necessarily, and there's only there's a diminishing returns to scale. And if you have like 10 people looking at all these alerts, like that's almost a waste of time. Why not have a machine do that? If I can have those same 10 people be proactively fixing problems, be building as opposed to fixing patches, now all of a sudden I've given time back to the mission. I can increase the pace of innovation. I can actually do that digital transformation that we're talking about, because the legacy approach that we used to have, where we had silos teams, inefficient processes, we're reactive, we're doing a lot of manual work, that doesn't work anymore. It was great 20 years ago, but what we're doing is we're getting a lot of tech debt. And at a certain point, there's so much tech debt that it's going to be very tough for us to really make a difference on these material disruptions that happen in our environment. Instead, what we're looking for is, consistent operational frequency with what we're doing.
And just another question before we wind up here. You mentioned earlier artificial intelligence. A lot of it sounds like RPA or even just scripting. But you also mentioned generative. And in the minute we have, is there a way to use generative in this whole milieu of predictive analytics and knowing what to do?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about it, we want to apply AI, automation, and Gen AI to scale. And what that means is taking all the different noise that's coming in, being able to sift through it and understand that, hey, if I had 1 million alerts today, these ones matter to me. And not only do they matter to me, give me a summary of them. Tell me which ones are important and how I should fix them. Make recommendations based on other similar outages. This is something I could do some automation or a Rundeck script that I could use. And then finally, once it's done, give me that post-mortem that says, here's what happened, this is why we think it happened, this is how we'll fix it, and now I have a knowledge base going forward so I can easily search across that. So lots of opportunities in Gen AI, and we use that very heavily, both in our product, just in general.
Right, and because it's your own data, you can trust the output of that Gen AI.
Correct. So we're using best practices of your own environment, and we can bring in some that we've seen from others, but it's basically based on what your environment's telling you, as opposed to, hey, I think this is a best practice that 10 other companies or agencies did.
All right. Well, thank you very much for some good insight, and that Apple Newton or PagerDuty is still relevant in this day and age. I want to thank today's guest is Eric Forsteter. He is the Vice President of Public Sector at PagerDuty. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search PagerDuty.